Hey YouTube and honor students. I wanted to take a second to talk about a poem that is pretty near and dear to my heart. It was one of my favorite poems in college, and it's this poem called The Canonization by Donne. If you haven't checked out Poetry Foundation before, I would highly suggest poetryfoundation.org. This place has like every poem you could possibly think of, and they also have um, you know, kind of like an audible type thing where people will read the poems, they tell you about the author, and all kinds of really interesting stuff. So if you haven't checked it out before, it's a resource that I use all the time as a teacher, so I would really suggest it. So what I want to do is let me just open up, I think I have it right here. I have the poem in a Word document so I can manipulate it and highlight stuff and stuff like that. But I want to go through and kind of read the poem first, just so we get maybe some idea of kind of what it's about. If you don't know what canonization means, that's definitely something that you should look up. But canonization means to raise to the level of saintliness, or like the level of a saint. I'll actually just, double check that so I'm not just making stuff up. Let's see. Definition. Da da da. In the Roman Catholic Church, the official admission of a dead person into sainthood, right? There you go, I proved it. Got a picture of the Pope and stuff over here. So canonization would be basically the process through which Mother Teresa went through recently, because she was named a saint. And a little bit about kind of Donne here is that he's what is called a metaphysical poet. Metaphysical poets basically take a usually common thing that they turn into something much more than common. So to take something and make it a saint would be taking, a person and converting them into this saintly icon that can be prayed to, right? So we might think that this poem is about religion or something like that, but in fact it's like radically different than that. One of the typifying features of metaphysical poetry is the metaphysical conceit. So that is one thing that I want to talk about today. So the metaphysical conceit, right? Let me make this the same kind of font I've been using here. So 18 bold Times New Roman. This is going to be this sort of transformation of Now, that's probably not the exact definition of metaphysical conceit, but that's kind of how I remember it. So this is like the transformation of one thing that is already established in the poem to another more substantial kind of elevated concept or idea, all right? So again, like the word canonization takes dead person and turns it into saint, which is a more substantial concept or idea, right? Also, with this poem, there's a lot of metaphor. So the metaphor basically builds on itself in order to transform the speaker and his lover into something more than they are, right? So a metaphor in general, though, is a comparison between two things. It's usually unlike things, but I'll just say a comparison between two things, not using like or as, alright? And metaphor is an interesting thing because on the surface it really seems like something easy to understand, but metaphor is actually a very abstract concept in which one thing becomes another thing, and they become basically interchangeable or able to be substituted like in your mind. Whereas a simile, for example, is a comparison using like or as. This is going to be basically just saying this thing is like this other thing, right? Which is not as substantial as a metaphor. It's just giving you an idea. It's almost like just giving you a description of what the thing is sort of like. So you can think of a simile as kind of like a weak metaphor in a way. And the other thing that I want to talk about with this poem is symbolism. So a symbol is something that represents another thing. Basically, it's when you have something that stands for an idea, concept, or I guess just idea or concept. I was going to say, or like a place, for example, the symbol for America would be like the American flag, the bald eagle, things like that. But America is not actually a thing. It's a concept, right? It's an idea that exists in our mind. You know, if enough people didn't believe in America, America wouldn't exist, for example, which is kind of an interesting idea. There's some symbolism like within this poem that I want to be able to kind of talk about by the end also. So we're really looking at metaphysical conceit, metaphor, and symbolism with this poem, and all three of these things are extremely complicated sorts of things in poetry to A, talk about, and B, really truly understand. For example, simile, we might talk about it if we see some. I might point them out, but it's not really a complicated literary device, and most kids in middle school kind of like learn it. So, the Canonization by John Donne, he starts by saying, "For God's sake, hold your tongue and let me love, or chide my palsy or my gout, my 5 gray hairs or ruined fortune flout. With wealth your state, your mind, with arts improve. Take a course, get you a place, observe his honor or his grace, or the king's real or his stamped face. Contemplate what you will, approve, so you will let me love." So we immediately are greeted with this opening stanza that has this guy who's in love, right? And he says, basically, you can criticize me for all of these things. You can compare me with your great wealth and your, many admirable qualities, but in the end, let me love, right? The next stanza here says, "Alas, alas, who's injured by my love? What merchant ships have my sighs drowned? Who says my tears have overflowed his ground? When did my colds a forward spring remove? When did the heats which my veins fill, add one more to the plaguey bill? Soldiers find wars, and lawyers find out still litigious men which quarrels move, though she and I do love." So he says basically, that first question, who is injured by my love? Like, why won't you just let me love this person that I care about, right? And he's kind of insinuating that the person that he's speaking to views love as this unimportant thing, right? This sort of lesser way to live life, right? He says, who's been hurt by it? He compares his sighs to things that could drown merchant ships. He says that his tears could overflow the ground of someone else, right? And then he compares, the heats which his veins fill with to, something that could kill somebody, like with a plague bill. So he says, soldiers find wars, lawyers find, litigious men, and, quarrels move these people, right? But instead, I choose to love, right? Okay, so we're kind of getting what he's aiming at, right? Now, this is where we start to get into metaphysical conceit territory, right? So he set us up with these two people that are in love, right? And then we get down here, and these sort of metaphors take on a different sort of meaning. So he says, call us what you will, he and his lover, right? We are made such by love. So you can call us whatever you want, but we're made this way by our love. Call her one, me another fly, wear tapers too, and at our own cost die. And we in us find eagle and the dove, the phoenix riddle hath more wit by us. We, two being one, are it. So to the neutral thing both sexes fit. We die and rise the same and prove mysterious by this love. Okay. So we have a lot of metaphors here. He says, call her one and me another fly. So he's comparing himself and his lover to flies that we would normally associate with grossness, with feces, with annoyance, right? He says, we're tapers too, and at our own cost die. So we're flames too, and at our own cost die. So we can imagine these like two flies buzzing around that catch fire, right? And he says that it's our own cost, our own life that is consumed by these flames, right? He says, and we in us find the eagle and the dove. So he converts the flies, which are the lovers, to an eagle and a dove, which are symbolic birds, right? Eagle is a bird of prey, right? Probably representing the guy. Dove is this peace offering, right? Probably representing the girl, right? He says the phoenix riddle hath more wit by us, right? So he says the riddle of the phoenix is made better by the tale of me and my lover, right? We two being one are it. So he says when we become one, we're like a phoenix, right? So to the neutral thing both sexes fit, because the phoenix is sexless, it's not male or female. He says that when we come together as the eagle and the dove and these two flies that are caught on fire, we become a phoenix and we are one thing, right? The phoenix is also a symbol for rebirth or change or turning into something new, right? So that makes sense that our metaphysical conceit happens right here, right? He says, we die and rise the same and prove mysterious by this love. So he says the love makes us mysterious. It makes us beyond human, right? So this is where we get that metaphysical conceit happening, is right here, okay? We also get metaphor upon metaphor upon metaphor. And Donne even ties in several symbols like the eagle, the dove, and the phoenix right here to kind of like elevate, or I don't know, I'm trying to think of like the really good word for that, but it's kind of like evolving these people from regular people into something mysterious, something powerful, right? That people have contemplated and told to other people for history, for all history. He says we can die by it, if not live by love, right? We can die if we don't have love, and we can live by it if we do. And if unfit for tombs and hearse our legend be, it will be fit for verse. And if no piece of chronicle we prove, we'll build in sonnets pretty rooms, and will and well a well-wrought urn becomes the greatest ashes and half-acre tombs, and by these hymns all shall approve us canonized for love. Okay, so we get our title here, Canonization, right? And he says that they'll be canonized for their love, or risen to the level of saints for the love that they have for each other. And then we have his kind of final thoughts on this sort of transubstantiation. He says, and thus invoke us, you whom reverend love made one another's hermitage, you to whom love was peace and now is rage, who did the world's soul contract and drove into glasses of your eyes, so made such mirrors and such spies that they did all to you epitomize. Countries, towns, courts beg from above a pattern of your love. So he says that, countries, towns, courts, all of these things that seem so important are going to beg from above a pattern of the love that he has, right, for this person, okay? So we get through the poem. One thing that we have to do with poetry is we have to create like a message, or identify what the author's message is. It's going to be really important so that we can talk about why these metaphors matter, right? Why this metaphysical conceit has to happen, and like why these symbols and such are important, okay? So when I read this poem, I really think that Donne is trying to say that love, though seemingly, I guess, childish or insignificant, is actually one of the most powerful things that someone can try to do, right? Or try to endeavor into. So we want to probably make a meaning statement here. We would probably start with in his poem, the Canonization. Canonization. John Donne suggests that love, while seemingly an immature or insignificant endeavor, is actually one of the most important endeavors that one can pursue in life. Okay, so let's say that's our meaning statement for this poem, right? And let's make it bold, larger, so you guys can see it. And it's Times New Roman. Okay. So if that's our meaning statement when we're looking at things like the metaphysical conceit, when we're looking at things like the metaphor or symbolism throughout this poem, we're going to tie that to this statement for the sauce, right? For like the thoughts that we're going to have coming out of our own minds, like where we make those connections happen, okay? So basically, we want to go through and we want to look for any metaphors, any metaphysical conceit, any symbolism, right? So, for example, the phoenix riddle hath more wit by us, right? That's going to be symbolism, right? So I'm just going to highlight that. The eagle is a symbol. The dove is a symbol, right? And these were like kind of our major symbols that I saw here. Tapers, maybe. Flames are often symbols for things like death, but I don't really think that he's trying to use that as symbolism here, okay? Now, if we were to look at like metaphors, for example, right? Okay, your place, observe your honors, grace, contentment, love. We could talk about like this one. I'm gonna make it green. What merchant ships have my size drowned? Comparing his size to some sort of weights that could drown a ship. Who says my tears have overflowed his ground? Comparing his tears to some kind of flood that could flood someone's property. When did my colds afford spring remove? Comparing his like lows in love to something that could freeze a spring, right? When did my heart, when did the heats which my veins fill add one more to the plaguey bill? All right, so he's talking about like when has the heat in my veins caused somebody to like get the plague and die, right? So these are all metaphors that we could choose to talk about, right, if we wanted to. This is all going to be metaphysical conceit. Like this is where we see them turning into something new. But I would say that this line here, we die and rise the same and prove mysterious by this love, is going to be the line that's going to show that maybe most, right? Because he's talking about their death and essentially rebirth through the symbol of the phoenix, right? The other thing that might show this is the line right here, these hymns and all shall approve us canonized for love, right? So all of the things that he's led up to or led with so far are going to add up and they're going to see them canonized. I like that all shall approve part because there's actually an approval process for who we make a saint. So for example, with Mother Teresa, she had to go through this rigorous process where people had to decide, should she be sanctified or should she not, right? I think you have to, if I remember right, you have to complete like 3 miracles in life or else you can't be a saint that can be prayed to. That's like a Roman Catholic Church type of thing, all right? So we have our why section, right? This is our why does this matter? We're going to always basically come back to this. So I want to actually copy that, and I want to bump down to another page, right? I want to put that up top because that's something that I need to keep in mind when I'm looking at these metaphors, all right? Now, if I was going to make an introduction paragraph out of, say, this statement, in his poem, Canonization, John Donne suggested love. Okay. I might start with something like, a statement like, love conquers all, right? Cheesy, cliche, but it's a hook, all right? Then I'm going to kind of lead with some general sort of information or some basic knowledge or discussion of this concept, right? Love is something that mankind has grappled with for all of history. And I'm going to kind of go dark here. I'm going to say, while man has perhaps the most destructive history of any creature on the planet, the capacity to love despite that is the most powerful quality that people have. Okay. So I lead into it, and then I get to my statement here about John Donne and what he says about love. Okay. Now, if this were a paper, I would probably be looking at how he shows us that this is his message, right? So, for example, I might say this is evident in the poem. Evident is a good word because it just means that there's evidence of it, right? This is evident in the poem through Donne's use of metaphor, symbolism, and the metaphysical conceit of the poem. Okay, so basically I've set myself up to have 3 paragraphs here: a metaphor paragraph, symbolism paragraph, and a metaphysical conceit paragraph where I talk about how that works, right? So ultimately I would probably, start my paragraph. I wouldn't probably mention Donne or the poem again. But I might say, throughout the poem, Donne uses, I wouldn't name the poem again, but I'd probably definitely talk about John Donne, uses metaphors that compare the lovers to various animals that can fly, all right? For example, the love that the speaker feels to forces of nature. I actually don't want to talk about the animals and stuff because that's getting more into like metaphysical conceit realm, right? So I'd say something like, for example, in the poem, Donne writes, comma, quotation mark, and I would find those lines that I need. So this one was one that I was thinking about using, right? And I'm gonna put this here. Okay, what merchant ships have my size drowned? Which is a question that he asks. Okay, now we need to also look at what line is that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So line 11, right? And we're gonna put here 11. Okay, because that's the line number. There's also some special rules to how you are supposed to cite lines. For example, you're supposed to put a slash in between the lines if there's a line break, but we lucked out, there's no line break here. So this is my quote that I want to deal with. This is my metaphor that I have to explain, okay? And I want to unhighlight it because it doesn't look right. In these lines, or in this line, Donne compares the love that the man feels to an object so heavy that it could sink a ship. Now that's telling us like what he's doing. Okay, now we want to kind of speculate on why is he doing that, right? This establishes the man's love as something that is beyond a regular circumstance, I guess, right? Even though he is being criticized for his love, he makes clear that love is something that could, this is kind of tongue-in-cheek, right? That could actually sink ships while he's downplaying it as harmless, right? So he's on one end saying, I'm not doing anything bad by loving this person. It's not as if my love could sink a ship, right? But on the other end, he's saying love is something so heavy that it could possibly sink a ship, right? So even though he's being criticized for his love, he makes clear that love is something that is on one end harmless, but on the other end so heavy that it could sink a ship. Okay, and we could see this being a very clever argument by Donne, right? He's being approached by this guy who's like, get off your butt, like do something with your life, stop just falling in love over and over. And then he's like, yeah, you're right, like, you know, I should probably do something other than, you know, fall in love. And he goes, you know, love is not hurting anyone, right? Because it's so insignificant, like you say. It's not as if my love has ever sunk a ship, right? Which is this very clever argument, right? Donne's a very clever poet. Now we need some sauce, right? So we could do something like, say, by making this comparison, Donne is downplaying love and also elevating it to epic proportions. Okay. This is later expanded upon through further metaphors in what stanza is that? 1, 2, 3. In stanza 3. 3. Let's do it like that. Okay, so if we're going to talk about metaphor, we have to talk about what's being compared. We have to talk about why that comparison matters in regard to our thesis statement or statement about the poem. So here's my thesis, right? What I want to prove. Okay. This is kind of like the intro that I would wrap around it to, you know, talk about it. The message itself, though, is just this part. Okay. Let me make that a different color. Blue is good. Okay, so that's my message that I came up with. Now you may come up with another message if you were to read this poem, but that's my message, right? This is how I'm going to prove it. This is my paragraph that I'm starting basically on metaphor. So I say Donne uses metaphors, right? I'm gonna make that red. Okay, I have my quote that is a metaphor, right? That's my what. I have how that metaphor works. So I say, in this line, Donne compares the love of the man that the man feels to an object so heavy that it could sink a ship, right? So basically I'm like, this is what he's doing with this metaphor. How green should I make this? Let's do that. This establishes the man's love as something that is beyond circumstance. Even though he is being criticized for his love, he makes clear that the love is something that is on one end harmless and by the other end so heavy that it could sink a ship. this is my kind of why section. This is my sauce, right? It's me explaining why this matters, right? I'm gonna kind of make that a different color, okay? And this is me going beyond just why this matters to talk about something maybe to do with the author, right? You know, how clever he is and so on. All right, let me make it a burgundy color. So I'm kind of doing a couple things here. One, I have my metaphor. Two, I explain the metaphor. Three, I explain why that matters within the poem. And four, I explain why that might matter for, you know, John Donne, right? So he's downplaying love and also elevating it to epic proportion. This is later expounded upon. Okay, this is my transition, so I'm going to actually change that to a different color, like black. And I want to think, can I add more sauce to this, right? I think I could if I were to go back to my thesis and kind of talk about that idea that this is one of the most important things that people can try to do because love will supersede all bad things, right? So I might say something like this. He elevates it to a point where it seems that love is one of the most important things that a person could do because if love could sink ships, then it is extremely powerful, and power, I'm going to put comma here, and power seems to be what the person he is arguing with is seeking. And I kind of screwed up here. I said the person he is arguing with. We don't know that Donne is arguing, but we want to say the speaker is arguing, right? So, because we don't know if the speaker is John Donne, we just kind of assume that it is, right? So this is how I might talk about metaphor in this poem, okay? And this video is going to get super long, so I think I might actually just cut this up into another video where I talk about the symbolism and the sort of metaphysical conceit just using this sort of paragraph here. Because it's not a paragraph, it's a stanza. This stanza here, stanza 3, just because otherwise this is going to become such a monster video that nobody will want to watch it. So if you thought that this was pretty helpful with giving you some insight on how to talk about metaphor, then, you know, please like this video. If you thought that, you know, the other content was helpful and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Just so that you can get this information. I know that my students oftentimes don't come to the YouTube channel because they're not subscribed, for example. So please do that. And remember that when we talk about these things, when we're looking at poetry, you absolutely have to interpret the poem first before you can begin looking at the metaphors and stuff like that and talking about their meaning, because the kind of art of poetry is to like develop and deliver a very deep message in a very concise, very short sort of manner by using these sort of stylistic techniques. All right, so just keep that in mind. And I will see you in the next video for talking about the metaphysical conceit and kind of the symbolism and how it all comes together in this paragraph here. All right, cool.